Hello everybody and welcome to Should You Play Tannenberg. Tannenberg is a multiplayer first-person shooter set during World War I with a focus on authenticity and realism. Tannenberg is also a standalone expansion to the 2015 game Verdun. Unlike Verdun, which was primarily set around the western front of the war, with deep-seated trench warfare, Tannenberg is located on the eastern front with dense forest fights and farmlands, creating less trench warfare and more maneuverable combat. The game is fairly cheap, as it shares a lot of work with the game it's derived from. It passed those benefits on to the consumer, coming in at around $18, about $8 cheaper than its predecessor. So Tannenberg has three multiplayer game modes: Maneuver, Rifle Deathmatch, and Attrition. Maneuver is the main star of the show, as the other two modes are often empty. This is your big 64-player game, where the map is divided up into sectors. Each sector has some sort of unique resource to use, such as refillable ammo, artillery radios, or spotting radios. A sector can be captured by standing in its capture point location, and once it ticks over to your side, then your entire team can use that area as a forward spawn. What makes the sector gameplay really interesting is that you can only capture adjacent sectors. If you try and go too far behind enemy lines, you'll be killed for desertion. So it really helps create a frontline mentality. Further to that, you can only capture adjacent sectors if the sector you're in is connected to your home sector. This means that you could have a string of 3 or 4 sectors, but if the enemy pushed to near your base, you could be cut off, not allowed to spawn and not allowed to capture. It's difficult to do, but when it happens, it results in a complete flip of the scoreboard. The win condition is based on tickets. The more sectors you own over the enemy, the faster they'll bleed tickets. The first one to 0 loses. Only one team loses tickets at a time, and they never gain tickets back. I had a great game on stream where myself and a Twitch chat user teamed up, and we helped freeze our tickets when we were super low, draining the enemies for a good 10 minutes, but unfortunately it just barely wasn't enough, and we lost when the timer ran out. But it still was a great game. Now we're pushing. They're bleeding by -10, that's really big. Learn to aim. Okay. Oh shit. Thought he was an ally. Alternatively, in some rare cases, you can actually push the enemy back all the way to their home sector and take it, winning you the game before the tickets run out or the timer, but that's a rare one. So the battle was fought between the German Empire and the Russian Empire, and you have 2 different divisions to choose from in each. You have the Frontovik and the Cossacks for the Russian side, and the KUK troop and the infantry for the German side. There isn't a huge noticeable difference in the sides that you choose to play as. They have some minor perks overall, such as a buff to stamina, reload speed, or suppression. And they come with their own equipment. But having played around 12 hours in total, I didn't notice any major differences between the groups. Essentially, everyone is using bolt action or semi-automatic rifles of the era, with slight model variations of the same weapon. Often the differences are slight increases to rate of fire at the expense of accuracy, and of course the weapons are accurately modeled, so the biggest differences you have to get used to is the new sights and how it reloads, which is pretty cool. There's also 4 classes within each group: the NCO, the Rifleman, the Gunner, and the Grenadier. The classes all come with their own set of perks too, affecting things like reload speed, cooldown on ammo supplies, and earning extra score depending on what you do. The classes each have 3 tiers, with tier 2 and 3 locked. You'll need to spend career points to unlock the different tiers, and they usually come with slightly improved weaponry or a secondary weapon like a revolver or a pistol. Career points are pretty easy to earn. I'm not even sure how I earned them, to be honest. I think it's tied to your level, but after 4 hours, I had enough to unlock everything in the game, and now I'm just accumulating more as my level progresses. When searching a game, you'll be asked to join a squad. Squads are groups of 4, and each squad has 4 classes as we mentioned before, so all the squads are the same. You can create your own squad or choose to join one, and it'll drop you in the game. If the squad doesn't have enough players, it'll be replaced with an AI bot to fill that role and to fill out the server. Alright, so let's talk gameplay. Tannenberg is essentially a one-hit kill game. If you shoot someone with nearly any rifle in the upper body, they'll die instantly. Someone's looking at me, for sure. He ain't looking at no one anymore. Neither is that guy. Neither is that guy. That guy is. Load. Revolvers and pistols are instant kills around the head and sometimes the chest, but are close range weapons. Grenades also have a pretty far-reaching area of effect. If you see it or hear it, it's probably too late for you. As a result of this, most players seem to play pretty cautiously and need to find effective cover. Tannenberg is self-described as more maneuverable than Verdun, but there's still plenty of smaller trenches, foxholes, dead animals, loose equipment, or buildings to take shelter in. Alright, we're gonna go real slow, but we'll get this. MLG? I am MLG at this game. Let's be fair. Like, I'm not even joking. The gunplay is also stiff and awkward to aim. It's not fluid, and you can't necessarily run and gun. For instance, reloading will be interrupted if you suddenly jump or lie down or stand up. It won't just reset though. You'll actually not be able to fire your gun as you may not have loaded a round into the chamber. It's really cool and often very frantic when you stand up and aim at someone and hear the click noise and freak out that your gun hasn't chambered around because you interrupted it. There's also suppression in the game. Getting shot at or close to will throw your aim off a bit and blur your screen, so you need to keep your head down and get to cover. MGs are dotted around the maps in different trenches or buildings, and these are incredible defensive positions to hold. Jumping on an MG, if timed correctly, will allow you to gun down and suppress huge masses of troops, and it's extremely satisfying when you do so. Player movement is also stiff. Strafing is pretty much not allowed, instead only really allowing you to move forward with any speed. If you try then and pull left or right, you'll slow down incredibly, which gives a slight feel of momentum and encumberment. This cautious play combined with the types of cover and stiffness lead to a game all about positioning. Whoever gets sight down a trench, or finds a good spot behind cover with a small gap, will be able to take plenty of shots with ease at the enemy. So the recipe for an intense World War I experience is here, but it never quite comes together. You have a squad of 4 with your NCO targeting orders at what he wants you to do, attack here or defend here. However, most of the time NCOs don't give orders, and most squads ignore each other, going off in random directions. Playing with a group of friends fixes this quickly, but if you're playing solo in a squad, it's anybody's guess what you need to do. As well as this, the squad system and the way you search games through squads means you often drop into a 64-player game where over half the team is AI bots. The bots are actually okay as far as bots go, but don't really follow teamwork or set realistic orders if they're the NCO. The game also does a poor job explaining the sector bonuses. For instance, the artillery sectors allow you to call in massive strikes anywhere on the map. It's a very valuable tool and an extremely valuable sector to hold. I've often seen people just sitting idle around these options to call in artillery or spotting, when it's pretty much always a good time to use it. Ideally, someone would call in the recon plane for you then to call in artillery, but there's no communication between squads, so it's difficult to ever coordinate attacks. I feel like the game needs some sort of command system that sets objectives for multiple squads, and if they follow it, they get a big XP benefit or something. To be honest, I just hate the entire squad system. I don't think it works in its current form. If you play with the same squad long enough, you'll rank it up and gain additional perks, but I just don't think the perks are worth getting, and it's too difficult to keep your squads intact, unless you know 2 or 3 others that have the game. I also don't think spawning on your squad leader or squad members is a good idea either. I'd prefer wave respawns to give a sense of push and pull, and more coordinated attacks. Currently you can just spawn on squad members as if this is Battlefield or something, but I think people should come out of the sector hubs mostly. Also, because you have to search games via a squad, you'll never know if a server is full or empty, so regular party systems with the server browser would be the optimal way to go, I think. The atmosphere in the game is also a little bit lacking. When you turn up the graphics to their max, the game looks pretty good, but the animations and movements of soldiers isn't quite right. They move slower than their perceived steps, for instance, so they'll look like they're running hard, but hardly moving. My only other issue is the sound. There's basically no music during the fight, which is fine, but there's basically no sound either. You just hear the same rifle shot over and over, and its positional audio sounds really off. It sounds like one recording of the gun playing at different volumes where you are, rather than echoing out at distances or reverbing or anything like that. Gunshots in real life don't always sound the exact same either, they vary slightly from shot to shot. It really kills the immersion when you just hear 3 or 4 sounds at one time and no more. When I put on some YouTube background war noises and the Battlefield 1 soundtrack, the game actually really came to life in a huge way, and I think the stream that we're watching agreed. The performance of the game seems fairly average. Surprisingly, it's actually built on Unity, and Fmod is the sound engine. I made a game with Fmod once before, and I can see why the sounds are so sparse. It's an ugly system to use in my opinion. There are tons of settings though, so it's easy to get good performance out of the game, but if you want it to look like the screenshots or close, it'll tank your FPS hard. Also, if you do get it, don't forget to turn on the gore option, as it's off by default, and it'll enable dismemberment and blood, and also animations for people on the ground who are still alive but dying. It looks great, as great as that can look. Jumping into a foxhole with someone clutching their chest and gurgling can be a pretty harrowing experience. So that's really all there is for Tannenberg. To me, it's a fairly average game in its current state, but has a lot of potential. It is early access after all, and the developers have completed early access of another game with very favourable reviews. The developers say they're focusing on working on UI improvements and sound changes, and this game will even allow you to access the Verdun server browser if you own both games eventually. For me, if the squad system and progression had an overhaul and the sounds got updated, I think I'd enjoy the experience much more. I have had some extremely fun matches, don't get me wrong, although most of the time I join games with barely any players and no coordination. The core gameplay, perks and weaponry are fun, and I love this sector's gameplay. Playing with a competent team can be extremely rewarding, even if you lose the game. Once they peak 6 feet deep, they sink. Alright. So, should you play Tannenberg? The game is a must for World War I fanatics and history buffs, and it comes in at a very affordable price point. It's also a much more rewarding experience with friends. If you fall outside those requirements though, I think you'll be met with balance frustrations and a lack of direction and coordination, more often than not, so maybe wait until the game is updated and I give it a full review. It might sound like a small thing, but this developer has released a standalone game that builds off of their previous title, whereby both games will sort of combine in the future. It might sound familiar to some, and it probably should, but this developer were nice enough to let the game come in at a cheaper price point and also say that it won't go up in price after it leaves early access. So I think good business practices should be rewarded, and the game is only going to get better, so if I were you, I would consider putting your money down to help fund future development and projects if this title in any way interests you. So thank you very much for watching. If you want to see more videos like this, let me know in the comments below, and let me know what you think of the game and if you'll be picking it up. Full-on reviews and smaller previews like this one are supported by an amazing dedicated group on Patreon. If you want to support this channel and help decide what games we cover, consider checking it out. Thanks again, and I'll see you in the next one.